Who the hell can wait till morning? Talk now at latenightsportsradio.com.
Blog Talk Radio.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The Mad Scientist Sports Lab is officially open, where the beacons are lit, the experiments will be plenty, and the Mad Scientist is about to drop the knowledge upon each and every one of his test subjects. My name is Nick Ficarelli. I am the Mad Scientist of Sports, talking to you live from Fantasy Sports Warehouse. Tonight we have a great show this evening. Last week, as everybody knows, I had a little bit of an issue with power outage and lost a couple of guests along the way. However, this is what I'm going to be calling my reboot show, as tonight I'm going to have Howard Shatsky, Leigh Steinberg, Allie Fontana, and Peter Flournoy, otherwise known as Dr. SEC. Looking so very much forward to this tonight. So, waiting for our first caller to call in, which will be Howard Shatsky. Just to give everybody an update, though, in kind of the world of college football, because obviously today is a huge day to set up the Final Four, as everybody's saying, for the playoffs. TCU winning handily. Alabama locking itself in, most likely as the number one seed, as they annihilated Missouri 42-13. Right now, a barn burner in the ACC championship with Florida State and Georgia Tech. And I think the biggest shock of them all right now, though, Ohio State absolutely destroying Wisconsin 38-0 right now, making both TCU and Baylor sweat their brains out, because this is the type of performance that I think everybody wanted to see by one of these teams, and may be the linchpin to get Ohio State into the top four. But we shall soon see. Tomorrow is when the votes come out from the committee. I got to tell you, I don't know which way they're going to go, but I really do feel that someone is not going to be very happy in not making the playoffs. And without further ado, ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to announce our first guest is here. He is one of the super agents of our time. He is one of the premier people in his craft, in his field, and it's an absolute honor to have him on my show tonight. He is the head of Pro Football Management. Without further ado, he really doesn't need an introduction. The man is just an introduction amongst himself. Let's just put it like that. Ladies and gentlemen, my first guest tonight, Mr. Howard Shatsky. Howard, how are you tonight? And again, a pleasure having you on my show.
Good. Thank you very much for having me on. I appreciate it.
No problem, sir. So basically, let's get the ball rolling over here in college football, where we saw two major coaching hires take place, in which Jim McElwain was hired at the University of Florida, taking over for Will Muschamp, and I think the bigger shocker, Mike Riley leaving Oregon State to go to the University of Nebraska, taking over for Bo Pelini. I wanted to get your thoughts, being that you're an agent. Are you shocked at the lightning quickness that these two coaching changes took place? Because I really thought this may be a little drawn out, just to make sure that they get the proper candidate. I'm on the opinion that I think both schools reached a little bit on these hires. Being that you are an agent, wanted to get your thoughts on how everything transpired so quickly.
You know, it was interesting to see what happened at Florida. You know, when they hired Muschamp, it was very under the radar. And this time with McElwain, it was extremely public. You know, people were live tweeting about the plane that the AD Jeremy Foley was on and following the truck that he was riding in. So it was a very public recruitment of McElwain. And, given when you saw that, there was really no question in my mind that Jeremy Foley was going to come back with McElwain as a done deal. It would have been extremely embarrassing to Florida had he come back without McElwain getting that deal done. There were some rumors out there that perhaps they offered Hugh Freeze and he turned them down, but I'm not sure they offered Hugh Freeze. And in any case, that was tremendous leverage for him to get his contract extended where he is now. Having said that, if you turn to Nebraska, Nebraska's a tough place. You go 9-3 and then get fired, and this is not the first time they've done that. They did it with Frank Solich also. So if you're at Nebraska, you better be prepared to win at least 10 or 11 games, or you may not be at Nebraska very long. Now in terms of whether Mike Riley's a reach or not, most people in the industry have a lot of respect for Mike Riley as a head coach, especially given where he's coming from. That's a very difficult place to recruit kids to. So even though Florida is in a somewhat of a rebuilding mode, they do have an excellent defense. They may be hurting a little bit on the offensive side of the ball, especially in terms of having an elite quarterback. So, a lot of people in the industry feel that given being at Florida and having the ability to recruit there, McElwain will be able to do some good things. But I think, it'll be interesting to see, because after getting it wrong with Muschamp, and Florida's going to have to pay about $6 million on that contract. This time, I think if Jeremy Foley doesn't get it right, now the arrow turns towards him and whether or not they should keep Jeremy Foley as the AD.
Now, the thing about the thing that really got me with regards to the McElwain hire, though, is that Florida is paying a $5 million buyout, and McElwain, on top of that, is paying $2 million. It comes out to a $7 million buyout, to Colorado State. Now, after the success that Colorado State has, where do you think they would go? Do you think they're going to go for an up-and-comer, or do you think they will go after the established person? I mean, we just talked about, Muschamp and Pelini. Do you think that, they would go after someone of that nature, or do you think they would go after the hot assistant, or maybe hire from within?
When you look at what the pattern is among FBS schools, 30% of them have a guy who has been an assistant at that school in the past. So, a lot of people thought Dan Mullen was going to be a candidate at Florida, but I don't think that Mullen and Foley have the type of relationship that was necessary for that to get done. So I would not be very surprised if Colorado State either promotes from within or goes and gets one of their former assistants who they think highly of to be the new head guy there.
Now, Oregon State's got to replace Mike Riley, and this is where I love to call it the coaching carousel. However, there is one major job that's still open right now, and that's the University of Michigan. If you are an agent for any coaches, would you go after the University of Michigan position, or after seeing what's happened in the last few hires after Lloyd Carr with Rich Rodriguez and Brady Hoke, do you think that's a school where the demand is higher than the supply? Let's just put it like that.
Oh, absolutely not. I still think Michigan is one of the premier jobs in college football. Their head coach is going to make somewhere between $4 and $6 million a year, depending on who the coach is. I think, after what happened with Brady Hoke and with the athletic director, Brandon, I think there's a lot of pressure on Michigan to get this one right. And despite the fact they talk about they don't necessarily want a Michigan man in there, that's exactly the direction I see them going in. I see them taking a run at Harbaugh and seeing whether or not they can convince him to come back.
Well, I'm going to go in a little bit of a different direction, and I'm looking down south to LSU. Now, the last time the Michigan job opened, there was no doubt they were going to go after Les Miles. At the time, Miles was very happy at what's going on with LSU, with his job at LSU. But you knew it was tearing him inside because to him, Michigan is his dream job. Now that the position is open,
absolutely, and I think that's a definite possibility. Like I said before, you see schools go for somebody that they know or have a comfort level with, and I think that exists between Michigan and Les Miles. So I think without a doubt he's a viable candidate for that position.
Well,
now the question is, if you're happy at LSU and LSU is a good program, do you really want to leave what you have going on at LSU?
That's a very good point. But the way I look at it, though, is the last couple of years, the recruiting classes haven't been as great as they used to be because of what's been going on in Alabama, Auburn, Mississippi State. It seems like the window to me at LSU is slightly closing a lot faster than the other schools. So you have to have this.
With a couple good recruiting classes, you can turn that around. And, knowing that he turned the job down before, what's really changed since then that would make him take the job?
Another very good point. One last thing before we go to the NFL. Lane Kiffin, one of the big elephants in the room, pretty much rehabilitated his image slightly at the University of Alabama as the offensive coordinator.
I think slightly is a huge understatement. I think he owes a lot to Nick Saban because without that opportunity at Alabama, his reputation is really on the downslide. So I think he enormously rehabilitated himself as a coach.
So the question is this that I pose to you. Do you see a major college program take a shot with him after what happened with him at both Tennessee and at Tennessee for that one tumultuous season and at USC for those 3 seasons? Or
let me put that question back on you. If you're a college athletic director, would you give Lane Kiffin a headshot as your head coach?
If I were a program like Colorado State, I would say yes. If I'm a program like Michigan, I would have to take a lot of pause, knowing what happened at his last 2 stops. So, to me, I think he would do best if he wanted to get back as a head coach to start at, say, a Mountain West school or an American Athletic Conference school, have a few good years there. Because remember, he's still young. He's still I believe late 30s, early 40s. So
without question. But the one thing you have to remember is there are some guys. Being a head coach is different than being a coordinator or a position coach. There are a lot more responsibilities and off the field duties that come with being a head coach. And some guys are made to be coordinators and some guys are made to be head coaches. So I'm going to have to disagree with you on that one. And if I'm an athletic director, Lane Kiffin is not the direction that I'm looking at. For my offensive coordinator, sure. For my head coach, no. We've already seen what happened in 2 different places. So while I am a Lane Kiffin fan as a coordinator, I'm not a Kiffin fan in terms of him as a head coach.
Okay, well, I see where your point is coming from, and I will have to say that while I do agree with you on some aspects, I do believe that at some point, he may be a head coach again, because there's going to be a school that's going to see him and like, you know what, after what he did at Alabama, maybe we should give him another chance. So
well, let me ask you this question. You said you could see Colorado State going in that direction, so are you trying to say that you see Kiffin being a head coach after this season?
After this season, there's a possibility. The door is open for him after the performance that he has put forth at the University of Alabama, where there will be a school that will definitely look at him and say, you know what, we can bring him to our school and we will improve exponentially. But then again, I could be wrong. I'm just basing this on my own opinion. And I have to be honest, if I were an AD, I would personally take a very long, hard look and decide whether if I would want to go in that direction or not. So
yeah, I got to be honest with you. I see Kiffin staying in Alabama for the next couple seasons at least. One good season I don't think is enough to really overcome what's gone on in the past, and I don't think a major school looks in that direction. And unless it is a major school, why would he leave a program like Alabama where he's been this successful to go there? So you got to figure if Kiffin's going to go, he's been at Tennessee, he's been at USC. It's going to be a major program that he goes to. I really don't see him taking a step backwards and going to a smaller program to be the head guy again.
Okay, I totally get where you're coming from, but we're going to move now to NFL, and I wanted to have you on the show for this reason as well, knowing that you are an agent. With everything that's happened with the Ray Rice saga and the Adrian Peterson saga, I wanted to get your thoughts on both issues that are before the NFL right now. And as an agent, how do you go about rehabilitating the image that's been forced upon, not only like the 32 teams, but the public as well? And how do you try to get said player to, get on an NFL team? Because it's been out there that there are teams interested in Ray Rice, but they don't know whether they're like staying a little away from him because they think, he's kind of sort of radioactive. Peterson right now is still with the Vikings, but you do not know where Minnesota's going to go, whether they're going to hold on to him, they're going to cut him or anything like that. So I wanted to get your feelings on what transpired with the NFL and what you would do as an agent and what advice that you would give to anybody out there, knowing that in the world of social media, the slightest wrong move, can pretty much almost torpedo your career.
Well, I think right now that's a very hot-button issue, and you see the union and the league going back and forth about the NFL conduct policy, and, it puts the union in a very difficult position when they're defending guys but yet not condoning the behavior. And the union's position is that what they're really defending is the process. And, you always hear the phrase due process, and, they look at precedents in the past where guys have only gotten 2 games for these types of offenses. Now, I think you're going to see a major change in the player conduct policy, and I think the penalties are going to be much stiffer. Having said that, there is a major problem which the union tried to take care of in collective bargaining and then traded off for other issues. Right now, we have a system where when you have to appeal as a player, appealing to the same parties that handed out that discipline. And what the players want and what the players are asking for is just a neutral arbitrator to make those decisions, like we have seen in some cases. And I think, having represented players in grievance hearings, I would most certainly think the time has come to have a neutral arbitrator. Having said that, Roger Goodell likes to be known as, the conduct commissioner, and so it's going to be a tough battle to get him to give up that control of the player discipline policy. Now, when we speak in particular about Ray Rice and what can be done to get him back in the league and how to really rehabilitate his image, first of all, you have to look at what Ray Rice is. Ray Rice is, I believe, 29 or 30 years old now, and he's a running back coming off a season in which he averaged over a little bit above 3 yards a carry. So Ray Rice is no longer a major commodity to an NFL team, which I think makes it all the more difficult to get him re-signed as a player. There's going to have to be a team that really needs a running back, because if they sign Ray Rice, given how shocking the nature of the video was, they're going to take a tremendous amount of heat for that. And, teams have sponsorships that are worth hundreds of thousands of dollars, and you have to say to yourself, is it worth putting those in jeopardy to sign a player of the caliber of Ray Rice? I don't know if I see him getting another opportunity to play in the NFL. In terms of Adrian Peterson, I don't think Adrian Peterson ever plays it down again for the Minnesota Vikings. And, one of the issues in the Peterson case, which was another hot-button issue, is, when should the commissioner have the right to discipline? Should they have to wait for the legal process to run its course, or should they be able to impose discipline before that? Obviously, the players would like for the legal matters to run their course before any discipline is imposed. So you have two cases where you have players at positions that have really been devalued, especially for older players, and now you have them with hot-button issues. I see, the Ray Rice issue being really more difficult to handle than the Adrian Peterson issue, just because you actually had a video that I think most people, including myself, were appalled by. Having said that, before these incidents, we're talking about two players who were extremely respected by their teammates, their teams, their communities where they were from, and that's why I think you saw so much support initially from the Ravens for Ray Rice. These are guys that were known as good guys before these incidents. So it's not like there's a history there of off-the-field problems with these players. So that's another thing that speaks in their favor of them having a chance to play again. But in terms of, off-the-field opportunities and things like that, I think they've really damaged themselves permanently, and I don't really see those things ever coming back.
Now, with regards to the image, that everybody had before these incidents, it was said a lot about what Ray Rice had done for the Baltimore community, what he'd done for the community in New Jersey, where he lived in New Jersey, and he's been on an all-out, PR blitz, since Barbara Jones, the neutral arbitrator, who had him reinstated immediately after her decision, to say, listen, take a chance on me. This was a one-time issue. Everybody knows who I really am. I made a mistake. He's pretty much gone out, and he's pretty much like saying, I'd like to just really close the chapter. You're going to, as a football player, as a teammate, you know where I stand. And I got to ask,
I'm sure he would like to close the chapter on it, but unfortunately, there's a video there of him knocking out his fiancée. So, unfortunately, that chapter is never really going to be closed.
I understand that. I'm just trying to get to the point that it's always going to be there, but he's trying to, like, what he's trying to do is, like, look, it's there. It's never going to go away. I understand that. I'm asking forgiveness, but he's also asking for football teams to take a chance on him because they don't want. He just doesn't want. He says, you know, he understands his livelihood is pretty much, you know, almost gone. And I'm thinking that, you know, this PR blitz that he's been going on, you know, with the Today Show, his wife's interview with Jameli Hill on ESPN.com. You know, they're trying their best to say, look, it happens. You know, she forgives him. You know, he's, you know, pretty much, you know, I don't know a very good word outside of saying, sympathetic to, well, not sympathetic. That's not the proper word, but I assume where I'm going with it. I personally think he will get another job in the NFL. I mean, let's look at past incidents where you've had guys that were, Mike Vick with his conviction. He was in prison for 2 years. Ray Lewis with what happened to him back in 2001, where he was tried, although found not guilty. He ended up staying in Baltimore, and having a Hall of Fame career. I understand he's 29 years old. There's a lot of wear and tear on him. Do you think that he really does deserve another chance to play, or do you personally feel that what's done is done? We're never going to see Ray Rice in the NFL again?
Well, I mean, it comes down to whether or not you feel this way. You saw Troy Vincent, who formerly was with the NFLPA and now has a high-ranking position with the NFL, and these are issues that are very close and near and dear to Troy because he was abused as a young kid. And, when you saw Troy testify, what he said was wearing an NFL uniform is a privilege, not a right. And I'm, having been in this business for as long as I have, I may be old school, but I happen to agree with that. The NFL is something that's a privilege. Whether or not these guys want to be, they are role models. I've seen it in the community. I see how people look up to them. I see how young kids model their behavior after what these guys do. So I think that there is a responsibility there. And you brought up social media before. Now, in the past, we would have never known about what happened with Ray Rice because there would have been no video of it. They would have taken him out the side of the building, and nobody would have ever known the incident happened. But we live in a different world today, and this is something that I explain to all my clients. Whatever you do, people will know because we live in a society now where everybody has a cell phone camera, everybody takes video, so if you're out in public, your behavior will be seen by someone. So it's a different type of world now. And given all these incidents, had this been 5 years ago, without question, I would agree with you that Ray Rice would get another opportunity. Now, having said that, domestic violence is never something that I would condone, but, I am from New Jersey. I do know people that know Ray. I represented players who played with him. I have only in the past heard good things about Ray Rice. So my feeling that he may not get an opportunity is not an indictment of his character. Video alone is an indictment of his character, and from what I've learned about domestic violence, often the victim, as you saw, his wife did, she apologized and she forgave him, and, you see that often, that women will go back to their abuser for whatever reason that may be. So I really don't see anything that comes out of her mouth that's really going to help his case to get him played again. Having said that, I think they're doing all the right thing. The only thing that he can do is really rely on his past as a good guy and do as many interviews as he can to try to show that to people. But whether or not that'll have an effect on an NFL team, that remains to be seen. But this is still a guy, let's not forget that these guys are human beings. Whether or not he ever plays a down of football again, extremely important that he rehabilitate his image, because this is a guy that's, obviously going to have to get a job one day because he's not set for life from playing in the NFL. He's going to have to live in society. So how he's viewed is not only important as a football player, but it's also important as a human being.
Well, Howard, I'd like to thank you so much for joining me tonight. Why don't you let the good people out there know where they can find you on Twitter and tell them about your company?
My Twitter handle is just my name, @Howard Shatsky.
Thank you so much, Howard. It was an honor talking to you tonight, and hope to have you on again in the not-too-distant future, sir.
Well, I appreciate you having me on. You have a good night.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Bye-bye.
And that was Howard Shatsky, ladies and gentlemen. And we're going to just move right into another unbelievably huge guest that I am so honored to have tonight. This is a guy that's been involved in sports agency for over 40 years. The man is so famous, they pretty much made a movie about him. And I have to say, he is probably the top man in what he does today. And I am honored and humbled to actually say he's on my show. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, Mr. Leigh Steinberg. Leigh, thank you so much for joining me tonight. How are you, sir?
I'm great. It's a pleasure to join you tonight.
So, Leigh, I just got off with Howard Shatsky, one of your peers in the sports agency world, and we were talking about the Ray Rice and Adrian Peterson situations. Being a sports agent, what do you do tell your clients regarding social media these days? Because Howard pretty much said it best. Everybody has a camera. Everybody has something. What you do is always going to be in the public eye. How do you explain that to your clients on how to be careful with regards to what they do outside of the realm of sports?
Well, essentially, the public-private delineation that used to exist exists no more, because the ubiquitous nature of a cell phone camera means that anything can be captured in any public situation. Even worse, I recall a situation where Matt Leinart was in his own home in a hot tub and had a couple women over, and one of them took a shot of them in his own home, not out in public, and that went viral. And when Coach Wisenhunt saw it, it left the indelible impression that Leinart was not focused on football in the off season, even though he was on his own time and was not in any way jeopardizing himself. So understanding that, it's a very high level of caution. And in the case of Ray Rice or Adrian Peterson, the best concept here is prevention. We would sit a rookie down and explain that pro football, if that was the sport, is this nation's passion. That the top 7 shows on Nielsen about 4 weeks ago were nighttime NFL football. Never has happened in the history of television, which means that NFL football is not only the most popular sport in this country, it's the most popular television show. And so that domination means that their lives are of interest to everyone. And we have a whole industry now which exists on finding flaws in celebrities. And so it's a discussion about not ever having alcohol in your system when you're driving, about going out with friends along so that if someone comes up and chooses an athlete off in a fight, there's a buffer there. It's about understanding never to use your hands in violence off the field against anyone, much less a diminutive woman. So there's a lot of cautionary notes to all of this. And when it comes to Twitter and everything else, that's like making a speech to a worldwide audience. So caution should rule the day.
Now, the other thing is that, with regards to pro athletes in the world today, what do you do to rehabilitate the image of said player that just went through pretty much hell and high water? I mean, we've seen what Ray Rice has done, him and his wife going on to the Today Show, talking to Jamela Hill from ESPN, Adrian Peterson, pretty much, doing what he's, on the opposite end. Adrian Peterson has been silent. He made his apology, a while ago, but since then, he's been quiet, and he just had his appeal heard by the NFL arbitrator. What do you do as an agent to rehabilitate the image of the player to help them, get back on their feet and possibly back in uniform?
Well, the first key in crisis control is to wrap one's arms around all the facts, to make sure any statements that you make are not going to be contradicted by facts that come out. And once that's happened, in most of these cases, it really is not a matter of legal defense. It's much more a matter of brand, because there really is not much defense to drunk driving, even if you can find some loophole to get out of it. So the key is to get out front of the news, to come very rapidly and make a statement that has these elements, that first of all, the athlete takes responsibility for his actions, that he is apologetic to all the constituencies that might have been negatively impacted, and that is his team, his owner, his coach, the fans, his family, and the general public, and then critically to make sure that he's taken steps to prevent a recurrence, so that there's action behind the repentance. So in the case of domestic violence, anger management classes, or working for domestic violent groups. So the key to all this is to get out there quickly, take responsibility, make major steps to show a change in attitude, and that it won't happen again. And then we don't throw young people on the trash heap of history for one horrible night. We try and understand that if they truly have seen the error of their ways and truly understand how they have to live, that with the passage of time, history is replete with examples of athletes who have been able to come back as long as there's no recurrence, as long as they're playing well on the field and rehabilitate themselves. Ray Lewis, who was charged in a murder case, comes to mind. Kobe Bryant, with some sordid facts, comes to mind. In the Ray Rice situation, I think he would have been well served to simply announce that he was taking the year off and that he hoped to be back in the future, but right now he was focused on working on his marriage, anger management, working with groups on domestic violence. In the case of Peterson, for a very long time, he defended the discipline he used with his child as something that he had inherited and part of a cultural inheritance, and he simply stonewalled, so that created even more public anger. And remember now, we have a viral and repetitive news cycle, so that a terrible moment or a bad quote or a negative image will not just be seen once by a member of the public, it will be seen repetitively. So by the time you've seen the Ray Rice tape 50 times, then the mental imagery is not that this player had one bad night, it's that this is who he is all the time. So given the extraordinary immense nature of all social media, it's really important to get out there quickly.
I know, and it's amazing that, with your experience in this business, 20 years ago, something like this could have been possibly swept under the rug. These days, in this day and age, obviously that's not going to happen. As soon as someone says boo, even if it could be an innocuous statement or something like that, it just explodes all over, whether it be Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest, Instagram, it doesn't matter. And next thing you know, not only is the player trying to defend himself, but he's got his people trying to defend him as well. Especially when it comes to his agent. So that's why it's just like a very dicey proposition, when it comes to that. So what advice would you give someone that's coming out of, say, college, that is going to have the privilege of playing in the NFL? What if you would have it like a symposium? What would you tell, college athletes what not to do to make sure that nothing like this ever happens to them?
That they are playing a public entertainment. It's not bread and butter on the table. It's not transportation to get to work. For their pro sport to be successful, it relies on the willingness of a fan to be favorably disposed towards the sport, to watch them on television, to attend games live, to play fantasy sports, to buy memorabilia, to do a whole set of things that they don't have to do. And so they're an ambassador in trying to build that brand. So if they don't want to comport themselves in a lawful manner off the field, if they object to signing autographs graciously, if they have a problem interacting with the press, if they simply want to do whatever their thing is and not be questioned, there's an easy solution. Go play on a sandlot. No one will criticize them, comment, talk about their off-the-field behavior, but of course they won't be getting all the largesse that accompanies being a professional athlete. And so it's a choice that they have to make. That's why for years I've always profiled potential clients. And we ask that they go back to their high school community, lay down roots, set up a scholarship fund, go to the collegiate community where players like Troy Aikman and Eric Karros endowed a full scholarship at UCLA, or Edgerrin James at the University of Miami, or Kerry Collins at Penn State, way of saying this institution helped shape me. And then at the pro level, put together a foundation that has leading business figures, political leaders, community leaders on an advisory board so they can help execute a program that will enhance the quality of life. So work done, running back for Tampa and Atlanta, just put the 139th single mother into the first home that she and her family will ever own by making a down payment and having Home Depot outfitted. It's a way to change lives, and they can be role models. So I had the heavyweight boxer Lennox Lewis cut a PSA that said, "Real men don't hit women," or Oscar De La Hoya and Steve Young, a public service announcement that said, "Prejudice is foul play." So they can be extraordinary role models. And if you sit and talk with someone that's young and they respond to it, then you know you have the type of client that's going to be a credit. Now, they're still young people, so occasionally you'll get a DUI or something else, but then they have to learn from it. So, having had in football 60 first-round draft picks and the very first pick in the draft 8 times, half the starting quarterback some weekends, and then in baseball a huge practice, and basketball and boxing and a series of other sports, that's the key. The key is character. And you watch, this next NFL draft is going to be the character draft. It's going to be a group that's more heavily scrutinized than any before them, because teams don't want to make a mistake like an Aaron Hernandez or Rice or Peterson.
Which actually is the perfect segue, because I was going to ask you this tonight, and it's likely you almost read my mind. Jameis Winston. It's going to be quite obvious that he's going to be coming out after this season, being that he is a redshirt sophomore, that he's 3 years out of college. But we've seen what's happened with him the last couple of years, the sexual assault allegations, the stealing of the crabs, the obscene gesture that he made that went all over social media. What do you think teams are going to be looking at with him? Do you think they're going to be looking at the whole picture, or do you think they're just going to focus on, they're going to focus on him off the football field?
Well, he's a gifted talent on the field, and he plays the most critical position. So teams are going to very much want him to be someone that they can build a team around. A franchise quarterback is someone that a team can win because of rather than with, that they can build a team around over the next 10 or 12 years, and someone who's able to represent the franchise well and who can elevate his level of play in critical situations, in adversity, to take the team to victory. They'd like him to be that. They want him to be that. So a lot will depend on how he handles the scouting process, the 20-minute interviews that he has at the combine with teams. Now, if you look at Johnny Manziel last year, that's a player who has freakish skills. He has an unparalleled ability to extend a play, and he has an amazing ability to bring a team back. So that player would get drafted right at the top of the first round. Granted, there'd be teams that would wonder if he could fit into their system, but still there'd be one team that would love to build around him. Instead, he went 22 in the first round and was the second pick of Cleveland. So that's what Jameis Winston has to watch out for. Now, there's no shame in going 22 out of an entire group of players, but I guess the point is that if Jameis Winston is well counseled and can look people in the eye and they believe that he's seen the error of his ways and there won't be recidivism, then his talent should get him picked at the top of the first round. So we'll see and watch. He's tearing it up tonight again, and in the ACC championship game. But the question is, it's going to be, will he be able to fit in with all the rules? The other thing going on is he's young. So none of us really would want to be judged by the stupidest things we did in the first few years of college. So it may well be that he just matures.
Well, you go back into some of the NFL drafts, and you look at guys like Warren Sapp. You look at guys like Randy Moss, guys that should have been, that were pinned to be top 5, top 10 picks, sliding out of the top 10. I remember Sapp was drafted 13th, I believe, by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Moss was drafted 21st by the Vikings. You know, you mentioned Manziel being 22. You know, is it more because teams are very leery or wary of what happened while they were in college? I mean, I believe there was some sort of drug issue for Sapp. Moss was, we got kicked out of Notre Dame, then transferred from Florida, ended up at Marshall. He had his issues. Manziel, which you just talked about. Is it more because teams don't want to get caught with what you said, like as the next Aaron Hernandez, or do you think it's just, teams just look at them and say they don't fit in our scheme or anything?
No, it's character, because Warren Sapp would fit in anybody's scheme. Randy Moss, when motivated, would fit in anyone's scheme. I mean, the weirdest example I ever saw was all the way back to 1983 when Dan Marino is the 6th quarterback picked in the first round and goes very deep in the draft, and there were rumors floating around about him that proved to be totally unfounded. So it's character. But the second thing that happens is this: if a player isn't picked on draft day where he's projected to be picked, then you have 32 teams sitting in their draft rooms wondering if someone knows something they don't. and they start to get leery or scared. So the very fact he's not picked causes teams to shy away. And then you have the case of the plummeting draft pick.
Well, speaking of draft day, the movie Draft Day came out earlier this year, and want to lighten it up a little bit, with whatever time that we have left. A little bit something about movies. There was this movie called Jerry Maguire from that was made a few years ago. It was about some guy who was some sort of super agent. It was about it was based on you. So, I mean, did you going to draft day and watching Kevin Costner as the general manager of the Cleveland Browns and everything like that? Is it really that crazy on draft day, or or was it like more, I don't want to say embellished, being that it was out on the silver screen?
Well, it's a little embellished. See, my role in Jerry Maguire Any Given Sunday for the Love of the Game was to vet the script to make sure the willing suspension of disbelief necessary to keep you in a motion picture didn't get ruined. So it's the look, it's the way people talk, it's whether or not something could actually happen or is outside the realm of possibility. It's again, the details. So you don't want true sports fans to think, well, this is a spoof, this could never happen. You want them to just be engaged in the story. So what I tried to do in those films where I was technical advisor is to make sure that, I mean, there's a scene in Cuba, in Jerry Maguire, where Cuba Gooding Jr. is knocked flat for a long time, and then he jumps up at the end and is dancing around the end zone. That's poetic license. But other than that, the film should look the way things actually happen. And Cameron Crowe followed me around for a better part of 2 years, going everywhere I went. And so he saw the way a draft looks. He saw what happens behind the scene with the first pick. He saw pro scouting day and Super Bowl parties, and he was at the draft with me when I had Drew Bledsoe drafted. So you're hoping that you get a story set against that backdrop. But I will tell you this, draft day in reality is the most dramatic day of the year. You have, it's absolutely electric because from a player and agent standpoint, it's the fruition of everything that this young man and his family have been working for since he was a little boy. And now it's playing out, and there's uncertainty and drama and tension. Draft time is not real time. It's like Chinese water torture time. A second seems like a minute seems like an hour. Drip, drip, drip. It's excruciating. I have to be at the top of my game, knowing exactly what teams are interested in players and what the probability is of where they go, so they don't sit under the hot lights in New York looking embarrassed and frantic.
Okay, one last question before we go. Was there a cush in Jerry Maguire for you? Was there?
Some of it is not things that actually happened, but it's like we were back at the draft. I had Bledsoe. Cameron said, "What's your?" Cameron Crowe, the director, said, "What would your greatest fear be?" And I said, "Well, suppose I think I'm going to represent Bledsoe tomorrow. Suppose upstairs there in the hotel, he actually has switched and decided on another agent. And suppose his father, who tells me that I have his word that we're going forward, flips. Oh, my God. The humiliation. It would be the worst nightmare of my life."
And sure enough, that was put on camera, and everybody's like, wow, that would totally stink. But before you go, why don't you let the people know about your book? And I understand that you're setting up for your 2015 Super Bowl party. So why don't you let the people know?
Okay. Well, the agent, my 40-year career making deals and changing the game, is still selling briskly. It's been a New York Times bestseller, and it's available at Amazon and better bookstores everywhere. This will be the 26th or 27th, I lose count, Super Bowl party. And we get together owners, players, general managers, coaches, political figures, corporate figures, entertainment people in sort of a heady mix. And usually there's a charitable payoff, so we sent a water machine in the wake of the earthquake in Haiti straight from the party that could purify the water for 140,000 people to save them from cholera. Last year we did a live hookup with the Mountain Brigade, Navy SEALs in Afghanistan, so they could talk to the party goers. So we're going to use the Science Museum, and it's a daytime party with ambient noise, so we have lots of things to do, and it'll be exciting. And then I tweet at Leigh Steinberg, very creative there. Just as creative as calling my book The Agent.
Well, Leigh, it was an honor having you tonight, and I would love to have you back on in the not-too-distant future. Thank you so much for joining me this evening, and I wish you, as always, the best of luck, especially with 2015 coming around the bend very shortly.
Well, you're an excellent interviewer, and I'd be happy to come back.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Have a good night. And that was Leigh Steinberg, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to take a quick 24-second break, and then after that, the lovely, the talented, the beautiful fantasy football maven that we have on every Saturday night, Allie Fontana, will be joining us. It's time to pay the bills.
You live it, breathe it, dream about it. You poured your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and this year, victory is yours. Because you've got FantasySportsWarehouse.com as your secret weapon. Fantasy Sports Warehouse is your one-stop shop for fantasy sports products, blogs, and the latest info. Go to FantasySportsWarehouse.com to get info to help you dominate the fantasy sports season wherever you go.
That's right, FantasySportsWarehouse.com. Once again, FantasySportsWarehouse.com, where we got some great content going, especially when it's a football season. And it's playoffs. What's that? Playoffs? That's right, people. We're coming into the nitty-gritty now. It's playoff time, Week 13, and what better person to talk fantasy football than my friend and, well, technically speaking, my date for the next 30 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, Miss Allie Fontana. Allie, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing great. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing very well.
Good.
So we're going into Week 13. Usually this
14,
is like wild card
14.
season. Week 4. Oh, that's right. Week 14. Wow. This is what happens sometimes when your brain is like literally like fleeting when one out of your 7 teams make the playoffs. Yeah, that's how bad it was for me this year. Yeah. So let's start right off.
I was actually. I mean, I'm not going to brag, but I missed on 2 of my 16 seasonal leagues. But I'm actually kind of complaining about it because, mentally, because you still have to do all those waiver wire moves and make all those decisions. And I'm in the middle of also kind of a move, so it's been just very stressful. Like doing waiver claims at 2 a.m. isn't my idea of fun. But
yeah, I would feel the same. I would definitely feel the same exact way. So, my dear.
Yeah.
Let the people know what pickups that you would be looking for this week to improve your chances on moving on to the next round of the playoffs.
Well, somebody tweeted that, Kenny Stills is still available in, a number of fantasy leagues. And I said, well, I don't play in any league where Kenny Stills is on the waiver wire, so it must be a very shallow league if he's there. So first and foremost, if by chance you made it to the playoffs and Kenny Stills is on your waiver wire, do pick him up, especially if, Brandon Marshall looks to be done for the season. There are a lot of iffy players right now, Deshaun Jackson and some other wideouts that are having trouble with health. I would definitely pick up Kenny Stills if he's available. But less obvious people, for example, would be the Jacksonville Jaguars' Marquise Lee. He's come on strong in recent weeks. He's extremely talented and explosive as a player. And, with Allen Robinson done for the season, we haven't really seen Cecil Shorts play with any kind of consistency. He's battled injuries and just, hasn't been the focus of Bortles' focus, except for an odd week here and there. Alan Hearn seems to be the deep ball guy. So you have Marquise Lee, who led the Jags in receiving for the second straight week, catching 6 balls for 75 yards in a score last week against the Giants, and he also had a 30-yard touchdown. So I'd pick him up for depth and upside, especially if you don't have much on your waiver wire. And I do like him this weekend. I also think, and this is another guy that, it kind of makes me a little nervous to say, because when would you think going into the fantasy playoffs that you'd be starting Jonathan Stewart? But he's another guy that's coming off of, his best week of the season. And it looks like with Cam kind of not being, running as much this year and just his play sort of devolving this year, Stewart looked great last week, rushed 12 times for 85 yards and had 2 for 25 receiving. Mike Tolbert came back last week but didn't do much, and D'Angelo Williams is out this week. Okay, so you do have to deal with the fact that Carolina's O-line is bad, but Stewart has a beatable matchup this week against the Saints, who recently lost one of their defensive tackles, Broderick Bunkley. So I do like Stewart as kind of a sleeper this week. And
now,
also
what about
Andre Williams?
I was about to go there. You read my mind.
You go there. I do like him with Jennings, looking doubtful. What, your thoughts?
No, I was going to say Andre Williams. What did you think of him? And I also wanted to bring up Devontae Adams after the week that he had last week against the Patriots.
Let's talk about Williams. He wasn't very inspiring when he filled in when Jennings was out in the past. But, look at what we've done look at the Titans in the last several weeks. It's kind of hard not to get excited about that matchup. The Giants did sign Chris Ogbonnaya on Tuesday, which looks like a sign to me that maybe Jennings really won't suit up. I know he did a little bit of work on Friday, but it doesn't look like it's a lock he plays. And listen, at least you'd think that Williams would be a top 20 back this week with a great matchup. I like him in daily lineups, and I also like him if you need a spot starter this week. Again, because some running backs we have issues, and some guys with not great matchups also. So I do like him. And let's talk about, Devontae Adams. Yeah, he kind of broke out. He did have a great week last week. I think it was 6 catches for 11 targets for 121. And he did drop a TD pass in the fourth quarter. So I think there's some inconsistency, but, when you play in a great offense, I'd rather have a guy like that kind of, on my roster than maybe some other players who, are playing with lesser quarterbacks. You could do a lot worse than having Aaron Rodgers as your quarterback. But I also want to say another guy I like, and I liked him last week, Jarvis Landry. He doesn't maybe have the ceiling quite as high a ceiling as some of these other guys like a Moncrief, who also was, had a big game. But his floor is pretty high, and he's getting a lot of those, passes from Ryan Tannehill. So particularly in PPR, he's a very reliable wide receiver 3. Because he kind of acts like an extension of Miami's running game. So he's another guy that, I'm starting him in the leagues where I own him this week, and I am benching, Michael Crabtree, Eric Decker, all these guys that have just done nothing this year, and really rolling with my waiver wire guys, Stedman Bailey against the Washington Redskins. I don't expect a huge game that he had last week, but I'm willing to play him as like a wide receiver 4 flex play in a PPR league.
Now, one guy that I picked up this week, and I was actually like, you know what, this may be a sneaky little pickup over here, is I went to Buffalo, and I saw that Robert Woods was on the waiver wire. And I'm looking, and I know Sammy Watkins has been banged up, and there really is, like, outside of Watkins, who's really been catching the ball there. So I went with Robert Woods. I wanted to get, your thoughts on what you think is going to happen with him for the rest of the season.
Oh, I think that's a great pickup, and you're absolutely right. Sammy Watkins seems to have hit a little bit of a rookie wall, and as you mentioned, he has been really playing through an injury. And perhaps it's because, of course, Buffalo is still in playoff contention. And, you give a guy props for playing hurt, I guess, and for playing through because, it is part of the game, but it certainly has limited his effectiveness. And also he's had some of the coverage on him has been maybe, a little bit tougher matchups than what Robert Woods had. But Woods has a lot of talent. He was set a 4 of 7 for 71 yards against the Browns in Week 13, and he actually led the team in receiving yards for the second straight week. So I think he's a guy that I would definitely have on my roster, a great pickup, and I do like him this week. It's hard to say that, Chris Hogan, who's also on that team, has been viable some weeks. So some of these guys, it's a little hard to predict, if they're going to be there for you every week. But I do like him this week, and I definitely think he's worth an add. And as long as Sammy Watkins continues to be sort of, limited in some capacity, it looks like a great situation for Woods to step up.
So let me ask you this then. Knowing that you're in the wild card round of the playoffs and stuff like that, what players do you need to avoid at all costs this week? Because I know, to me, I look at the San Francisco 49ers. I have Michael Crabtree, and I'm not starting him this week. He has been such a major disappointment this year. It seems like that whole offense has pretty much totally regressed. So, to me, I'm avoiding him at all costs.
Yeah, I agree. You can't start Michael Crabtree no matter what the matchup is, because the problem with the 49ers, and you're right, when Frank Gore gets volume touches, he delivers for fantasy owners. He puts up some numbers, but, their offense is so inconsistent, seems to lack a bit of an identity. Colin Kaepernick has regressed. Occasionally he makes these incredibly, difficult throws and completes the pass, but more often than not he misses very easy throws. So really there's no one, other than Anquan Bolden as a pass catcher that you'd feel relatively comfortable starting. He's been a good play most weeks this year. But I completely agree. You can't start Michael Crabtree. You can't start Colin Kaepernick as your main quarterback. I wouldn't feel comfortable. And, a lot of people say, oh, but the matchup's great. But these are guys, when you look back, look at the game logs, for the most part, even in a plus matchup, Vernon Davis, that anybody would still be starting Vernon Davis. Insane. If you made it to the playoffs using Vernon Davis, then you must have had a team that was good otherwise, because I kept Travis Kelce as my tight end on a bunch of teams because I drafted him as a 2 often, but I lost Dennis Pitta, I lost Kyle Rudolph, but I just stuck with him. And yeah, he didn't deliver the numbers that maybe we thought he would based on his talent and the fact that there's very limited quality receivers and dynamic players in Kansas City aside from Charles. But, just the way the Chiefs roll. But, I could get by with Kelce. But, the San Francisco team, forget it. It's a pit for offense. And I also feel similarly, I think we talked about Shane Vereen last week. Now, his role, they've gone sort of power running. So it's a little scary to think I have Shane Vereen on a lot of teams. And while the game could be a Shane Vereen game, I also thought that last week, and he did nothing. So that he makes me nervous in terms of a guy that I, think about, thought I would have used, but now I'm not so sure.
Well, I'm glad you actually brought up the Patriots, because it seems to me that LeGarrette Blount has pretty much become the number one running back. It's like Belichick sees him and he's like, "You're my guy." It didn't matter that 2 weeks ago Jonas Gray ran for over 200 yards. Seems like now he's in the doghouse for being late to a meeting. Vereen, obviously one of the bigger fantasy football disappointments this year. Seems to me that LeGarrette Blount is going to get about 15, 20 carries a game and get at least anywhere between 70 and 100 yards. Definite start, I'm assuming?
Well, I don't know. I don't. The thing is, I don't know, because last week Brandon Bolden was much more involved than he'd been in, we saw Brandon Bolden one time and then he disappeared. So that's the problem. When you're in these situations, who's the guy? And, a lot of times we see with Belichick that it's, depends on the opponent. So I'd actually be a little bit leery of even Blount this week. I don't think he did very much. I don't have the game log readily available for last week, but it was a pretty quiet week for him. I'm just seeing if I can find that. But anyway, it's just one of those things where, depending on the opponent, they may throw more this week. And, of course, we know that Blount, isn't involved in that. If the Patriots look to kind of spread things out against the Charger defense, there's a couple guys that they could pick on there and sort of take advantage of. So, but I don't know about power running tomorrow. But the problem with Shane Vereen is that his floor is pitifully low. In standard leagues, he had 13 total fantasy points over the last 3 or 4 games. So, he's basically unstartable in standard. So anyway, I think that the floor is the problem with him.
Now here's what do you call something, Matt? Another team that I want to stay far away from, and that's the Arizona Cardinals. What a difference it makes from Carson Palmer to Drew Stanton. Now, a couple of weeks ago, you and me actually talked about John Brown, and what happens last week? I pick him up, and next thing I know, he's now, all of a sudden, only 2 catches for like 46 yards, and wide receivers that hadn't seen the field all day were like were in front of him on the targets and catches. What is going on there? Now it's out that Ellington may be out this week as well. Is this definitely avoid at all costs, stay away? It's the bubonic plague, and this is a Bruce Arians coach team, and usually they're pretty explosive when you talk about that.
Yeah, it just doesn't seem that Stanton can execute the Arians, the Cardinals' offense. The way it needs to be executed. It's just, you can't. If somebody just doesn't have it, you have to try and, I don't want to say even go into game management, but you have to try and get them to do what, as little as possible to, maybe. Because, the Cardinals have to win this week. They've lost 2 in a row now. Things are getting tighter. If a guy doesn't play the way you need him or want him to play, there's no plan B. They're not going to turn to, I guess it's Logan Thomas right now. And I know they picked up Ryan Lindley, but that's, come on. So, and the problem, as you said, I mean, Ellington, the run game hasn't been great anyway, and Ellington's also played hurt. And so this week they're starting Stephen Taylor, as the main guy, and we'll see what happens with Marion Grice. So, and they already cut Michael Bush. At least that's what I saw the other day.
Yeah,
so,
which actually to me was a little bit of a shocker because a couple of years ago, Michael Bush was like one of those guys that you could throw out there that was a touchdown machine.
Yeah, it was so strange because he just, when he was in Oakland, it was always Michael Bush, Darren McFadden. And then I think he went to Chicago, and he really occasionally, got a goal line carry. This is before they wouldn't necessarily give Matt Forte goal line carries, which is insane. But, so they'd bring in Michael Bush, and then he didn't do much. And then it seemed like he was out of the game. And I know he was signed, we like to say signed off the couch recently. But, yeah, gone again. So, we'll see what happens there. But, I think people just didn't realize. I mean, you could say what you want about Carson Palmer, but he is a professional quarterback. He knows the game. Yes, he's getting older, and maybe he wasn't as mobile as he once used to be, et cetera, but he knew that offense, and he could execute the offense. So it's really come to a crashing halt. You're right. I ended up dropping John Brown in a couple of leagues to pick up other people because, depending on your bench depth, I mean, it's not the player, it's the situation, and you have to take that into account. And I don't see it getting better in the short term. So there's always next year.
Now, here's what we go. I'm going to go now from staying away to must starts. And to me, it seems like if you ever play the Chicago Bears for the rest of the season, you must start. It doesn't matter what team you are. I mean, after Thursday night, looking at how crisp Tony Romo was, how DeMarco Murray ran all over that offense. I mean, it just seems to me that if you're in the playoffs and if you see the Chicago Bears on the schedule, you must. It doesn't matter who's on that team. Someone is going to score. That's how pretty pathetic that the Chicago Bears defense has been. So if you had DeMarco Murray, if you had Des Bryant, if you had someone like Tony Romo, kudos to you on getting a nice little leg up for Sunday afternoon. Now,
well, actually, I say though that Tony Romo had about a 20-point game because DeMarco Murray was doing the heavy lifting. And basically, Cutler, I actually started Jay Cutler and DeMarco Murray in the league, and Cutler got 35 points. I mean, he had a lot of garbage time, but, they were playing from behind. So, but so I said, I mean, Romo had a good game compared to the 3-point or negative point game he put up on Thanksgiving, but he didn't have to do as much. Terrence Williams, that we mentioned people that you don't want to start. I mean, again, I don't know why he'd be on any roster right now unless you're in a very deep league because he's done nothing for multiple weeks now. I mean, when Cole Beasley has a 2-touchdown night, that's kind of bizarre. I'm sorry.
And for all you Des Bryant and all
Cole Beasley was a thing the other night.
I was about to say, for all those Des Bryant owners, how many TVs do you think were broken that night?
Many, I'm sure. But yeah, so and actually though, you do bring up a great point though about sort of if you are in that situation where you played opposite someone who had any of those key players. I mean, Forte had a productive game. Martellus Bennett lit it up. He had, I think, 26 points or more in PPR. So he was lights out, and that's also a thing. Start your tight end against the Dallas defense if they're halfway decent because, Bennett just lit it up. So, sometimes now when you go into Sunday, you may need to be a little more aggressive about who you start. Go for a guy that may have, the higher upside, because if you're playing from a deficit. So you really need to kind of look at your roster and, decide sort of what your comfort level with some risk is, because, you can play plenty of low ceiling guys. I do like this weekend Isaiah Crowell. Terrence West is back in the doghouse. He had another fumble last week. Crowell had been sort of dealing with a hip injury, but it doesn't appear to be too serious. And I do like his matchup this week, so I'd be looking at Crowell. I also, I did mention Stedman Bailey, but as I said, you don't get inspired with Sean Hill as your quarterback, but, against the Redskins, Bailey has 12 catches, 189 yards in his score in the past 2 weeks. And, keep in mind that those numbers are actually sort of higher than his combined productivity from all other weeks this season. But he was suspended for 4 weeks. And, he probably had to get his groove back and actually sort of develop some sort of rhythm. And then when they went back to from Austin to Sean Hill, I guess, he had the rapport there and Hill seemed to trust him. But I do like him as a flex play this week, because the Redskins are allowing 11th most fantasy points and really haven't shown many signs that, they're going to tighten up coverage there. But they did look better last week with Colt McCoy. Even though they lost the game, the Redskins were at least in it. They were scoring some points. It's unfortunate that Deshaun Jackson is injured, and it looks to be a game-time decision. But another thing, let me ask you this, Nick. I've had a lot of questions. Do I start Julius Thomas or Kobe Fleener, Dwayne Allen, and like a laundry list of players? Thomas is is also setting up to be a game time decision, but let's say he's active. Do you start Julius Thomas?
I, without any trepidation or shadow of a doubt, absolutely start Julius Thomas, because here's the other thing that people need to know for that particular game. Jacob Tamme right now is also a game-time decision. If I'm John Fox right now, and if Julius Thomas is at, say, 80 to 90%, I'm putting him on the football field. Is he going to be productive? Maybe at the goal line. Now, if you're in a touchdown-only league, I would have no doubt starting Julius Thomas, because he's going to get something within the 20s. If you are in a PPR league, points per reception, I honestly have to say that it's a 50-50 call, but my heart would be, my head would be saying, think about it, but my heart would be saying, he's gotten you this far, why not take the chance? Because I look at Kobe Fleener, if Dwayne Allen is back for this game, Kobe Fleener's stock goes down a little bit. I look at all the other tight ends, and I just scratch my head, going, "There's what? There's nothing there that would that would like make me not want to start, Julius Thomas." So that's my feeling on it.
Yeah, it's a tough call. I think that there are guys that, it's a risky situation. And, you wonder about the snaps, the decoy, will he hold up? And he hasn't been really available for the last several weeks. I do agree, in standard scoring, you may not find somebody as appealing. But frankly, I might start if I had picked up. Walker had a dud last week, but, I think it was just the game flow. But I do think he gets back into it this week. The Giants are giving up a lot of points. I might play Kyle Rudolph, who scored last week, and the Jets have given up tight end TDs all season. And I also like Kelsey against the Cardinals. But I do understand that you're looking and saying, it's Julius Thomas, but he's very touchdown dependent most games, and that's kind of, I've had some disappointment. It's sometimes they'll get like 2 touchdowns, but then there'll be nothing for a couple of weeks, and of course he's had a multi-week injury. So I think it just depends on who your plan B is, and does it look tight? Does it look like a tight contest between you and your opponent, or do you have a little bit of wiggle room? But yeah, it's hard to sit a Jimmy Graham or a Gronk or even a Julius Thomas. And so, yeah, it's a tough call, but a lot of people have been asking. So sometimes if he's really not healthy enough to play, you just hope that these coaches just give the guy another week of rest, because for the Broncos, it's, they don't care about our fantasy playoffs. They're thinking about legitimate postseason play, and, they want him healthy for that. So hopefully, if he's active, he can really go out there and play the way, to full capacity, not limited snaps, not sort of the decoy.
Well, Allie, as always, a pleasure having you as my date for this last half hour. Why don't you let the good people know where they can find you and the other shows that you happen to be appearing on during the week?
Yes, thank you so much, Nick. You can find me on Twitter at Allie Fontana. I also do a weekly spot on Tuesdays with Maximus and the Bartender on Extras Radio, and on Friday nights with the guys, the 2 Steves of the Cheap Seats, also on Extras.
Well, I got to say, as always, the pleasure is all mine having you on this show every week talking fantasy football. Obviously, we're going to be on again, you and me, next week at your normally scheduled time, 10 p.m., talking about the divisional playoffs, as they would say in fantasy football. But for normal, everyday, NFL players, it would be Week 15. So, have a good night, my dear, and I shall talk to you next week.
All right, Nick. Good luck this weekend in your playoff round.
Thank you very much. I appreciate
it. And thanks again. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that was Allie Fontana, our fantasy football expert here at the Mad Scientist Sports Lab. We're waiting on our final guest this evening, Dr. SEC himself, Peter Flournoy. Just waiting for him to come on. Obviously, we're going to be talking about the college football playoff and everything else that happened today in college football. So I will get the ball rolling on that right now. The ACC championship has just ended. Final score of Florida State 37, Georgia Tech 35. Another nail-biter for Florida State. I have to say, though, Jameis Winston looks really good tonight. Devin Hill ran the ball extremely well for Florida State. Was really one of the big difference makers, out there for Florida State tonight. Georgia Tech went toe-to-toe with them in the first half. However, Florida State's defense certainly tightened up in the second half. Ball wasn't moving very, very well, and it seemed that Paul Johnson in the second half got out-coached by Jimbo Fisher. And I have to say, because of this, there should be no doubt that Florida State is one of the Final Four teams going into the the NCAA playoffs. I mean, yeah, they're ranked 4, but they're the only undefeated team in the football bowl division series. They've won now, I believe, 29 or 30 games in a row. They're the ACC champions. Yes, it hasn't looked pretty. This is not the same team as last year at all. This is a team, though, that perseveres every single week. They will be in the playoffs. Also in the playoffs, without a shadow of a doubt, the number 1 ranked team in the nation right now, the University of Alabama. They pretty much did what they had to do. They played the SEC championship game today and totally and completely annihilated the University of Missouri. Blake Sims looked really good out there, And what a reclamation project for Lane Kiffin. The guy has been beaten down more times than you can say boo. Part of it has been brought upon himself, with his attitude, because he does come off as, slightly egotistical. I'll just leave it at that. But I will say this. The offense was humming. The defense shut down Matty Mock and the Missouri Tigers. And I got to say that, Alabama put everything together for this game. They will probably be the number 1 seed. I can't see any reason why not. Although last night, after the performance of Oregon, I would be really, really, really scared of the Ducks. The team is finally healthy. That's right, finally healthy. And they are extremely, extremely scary. Marcus Mariota had another great game last night. I have to say he will be there ready to accept his Heisman Trophy. There should be no doubt about it after last night. Arizona, who has given Oregon fits the last couple of years during the regular season, didn't have any answers for Oregon at all. And it was, a virtuoso performance by the Ducks. They became the Pac-12 champions. They are probably going to stay at number 2. Now it gets a little dicey because everybody did what they had to do. The question is now for everybody, who will be the 4th team? Will it be TCU? They were expected to win today, and they won in extremely dominating fashion, 55-3. 55-3 over, Iowa State. 460 yards passing for Boykin. He broke Andy Dalton's record for single-season touchdowns. An unbelievable performance by Gary Patterson's team. But it was expected. You're playing Iowa State, the dreg of your division. You move to the other side, and you see Baylor, team that's ranked 5. They played the 9th-ranked team in the playoff system in Kansas State. They went and took care of business. They won 38-27, and it was a very, very good performance by them. It was a must-have game for them, and I will pretty much say this. That is the type of victory that you need on your resume, because let's look at it like this. It's the last game of the season. You had one team that played a nobody in Iowa State, and you had another team that played a top 10 team in the nation in Kansas State. The playoff committee is going to be looking very hard at these two games. And a lot of people were thinking, well, once again, let's look at the Baylor head-to-head victory over TCU, which has been talked about ad nauseum. But then you look at that loss, and you look at Baylor's loss to a 5-loss West Virginia team that's sticking out like a sore thumb. I mean, it's people are still really up in arms about what the playoff committee is going to happen. But I'm going to say something right now as I take a glass of water. It might all be moot, because what is happening right now in the Big Ten championship game is nothing short of amazing. Ohio State has put its imprint into the brains of the playoff committee as they are thrashing the University of Wisconsin 52-0. A lot of people were looking at this game and saying, how is Ohio State going to respond losing J.T. Barrett and starting Codrell Jones? Well, I think they responded pretty well. This has been the most dominant that Ohio State has looked this year. I personally think that after this performance last night, that both TCU and Baylor right now must be sitting there chewing down the nubs of their nails, because this was what they were afraid of. They were deathly afraid of Ohio State putting up a performance like that. And by doing so, it's going to make the playoff committee's decision on the fourth team that much harder. That much harder. So now we are at the point where everything is all said and done. The games, they have been played. Now it's up to 12 people sitting in a room, breaking everything down to make the decision on who plays in the college football playoff. I have to say this. I've been keeping up on Twitter all night. I've been keeping up on Facebook all night, and everybody has their own opinions. After tonight's performance, and it pains me to say this, I really do feel that Ohio State will be the fourth team that gets put into the playoff. Just for the sheer fact of the total, complete game that they played tonight in a conference championship against a Wisconsin team that was led by Melvin Gordon, who broke Ron Dane's single-season rushing record, once held the FBS single-game rushing record at 408 yards, which, by the way, people seem to forget that was done in 3 quarters, not 4, only 3. They sat him in the fourth quarter, and they've totally shut him down. They shut down Joel Stave. They shut down Wisconsin completely. There can't be any denying it. There really can't. And, you know, as for much as I respect TCU and what they've done, as much as I respect Baylor and what they've done, you know, it always comes down to that, to me, to that last game. And I really do feel that it's going to be Ohio State as the fourth team with both Big 12 co-champions on the outside looking in. And it stinks. It stinks for them. I understand that. But that's the hand that will probably be dealt tomorrow. I mean, there are going to be people saying, well, TCU's ranked 3. How could you bump them out? Well, unfortunately, the Big 12 does not have a conference championship. I would have loved to see a rematch between TCU and Baylor in a conference championship game to say, hey, winner of this game, you know, is the Big 12 champion. But unfortunately, that's not going to happen. Bob Bowlesby saying, well, we're going to give you co-champions, and that will give you something to think about. This might end up backfiring on you because now you're pitting 2 teams against each other in the same division, whereas you got a team like Ohio State sitting there, you know, licking its chops after doing what they did tonight to Wisconsin. So we're going to look at this I'm going to look at it like this. The Sugar Bowl, which is 1 versus 4, is going to be Alabama versus Ohio State. The Rose Bowl, which is 2 versus 3, is going to be Oregon versus Florida State. I will be shocked, though. Well, I won't be shocked. I will be surprised. Won't be surprised, I should say. However, if Florida State is still considered the 4th best team out of everybody. Just for the sheer fact that, once again, tonight, winning the ACC championship game by the skin of their teeth, 37-35. I won't be surprised if Ohio State, Baylor, whoever it may be that the playoff committee is going to put into the playoff, leapfrogs Florida State. So you could be looking at an Alabama-Florida State semifinal matchup. How juicy is that? And then you're going to have Oregon versus Ohio State, or possibly Oregon versus TCU, or possibly Oregon versus Baylor, you don't know because we're still waiting. We have to wait until tomorrow night at 7:30 p.m. on who is going to be in. Well, I can also tell you this. There's the group of 5 conferences that are looking to get into one of those top-tier New Year's Day, New Year's Eve bowl games that may have a chance to get in, and they had to be ranked in the top 25. We've seen East Carolina come in and go out. We've seen Marshall come in and go out. And now we have Boise State. And Boise State right now is taking care of business in the Mountain West Conference Championship game. They're beating Fresno State right now 21-0. If everything holds, they will stay in the top 25, and they will make a very big bowl game. And it looks like that they will be going to the Fiesta Bowl. And for all those that remember, I think it was about 6-7 years ago, there was a game in the Fiesta Bowl. It was the mighty Oklahoma Sooners against the up-and-coming Boise State Broncos. And, well, people seem to forget the last 2 plays of that game, the hook and ladder and the Statue of Liberty. Oh, and also the pitchback pass. They put out all the stops. Who could ever forget that? So there is history there for the Boise State Broncos. And if they make that game, more power to them. I really do feel that they will put up a very good fight against whoever they go against. So be on the lookout for that as well. But I would not want to be one of the 12 sitting in that room trying to make a decision regarding who is going to be in the top 4. Because you have to sit there and scrutinize everything from A to Z and back again. And, they're going to be nitpicking at probably everything. They're going to be nitpicking at strength of schedule. They're going to be nitpicking at out-of-conference schedule. They're going to be nitpicking at, how they progressed throughout the year. And I really have to be like on 75 shots of espresso to be thinking about all that if I were a member of the committee, because it's going to be probably a sleepless night for the 12 going into tomorrow and making that final decision. There's going to be backlash no matter what happens. There's going to be, outrage by TCU. There's going to be outrage by Ohio State. There's going to be outrage by Baylor. Hell, we could all be shocked, and there could be outrage by FSU. The system is never going to be perfect. The system will never be perfect. I mean, everybody raged against the BCS. Everybody raged against the bowl champion, the bowl championship before that. Everybody raged against the voting system with the AP and the UPI back in the day. But I will say this: you finally have your playoff. The last 5 weeks of the football season that we have seen has pretty much became an elimination week every single week. And it just so happens that we're running into a scenario where we have 5 teams trying to get 4 spots. And it's going to feel horrible for one of those teams. And I'm going to say it again. I really feel that the Big 12 is going to be shut out tonight after what Ohio State did. And I will say that Ohio State couldn't have picked a better time to pick and play their best game of the season. TCU had an awesome season. Baylor had an awesome season. There's no doubt about that. It's just that when you play only Iowa State at the end, and when you have that loss to West Virginia on your record, and with the way Ohio State beat Wisconsin, making that loss to Virginia Tech at the beginning of the year look like more of an aberration than anything. And here's another thing that the playoff committee, which I can bring up about the playoff committee. They are probably going to look at that Virginia Tech game and say, you know what, that was J.T. Barrett's second game. It was the second game of the season. Braxton Miller had just gotten hurt. J.T. Barrett at the time was an unknown quantity. And then you saw what happened with J.T. Barrett the rest of the year. He gets hurt, out for the remainder of the season. They come in with a redshirt sophomore who hasn't played it down at all, and they dominate Wisconsin. And it just makes you wonder if that's going to also play in the minds of the committee, knowing what happened tonight. And I got to say, if you're a TCU fan, if you're a Baylor fan right now, you have to be sitting there shaking your head going, wow, could this really happen? Could we really be shut out of a playoff berth? And I got to say, unfortunately, yes, it may just happen. I guarantee you this. After tomorrow, there will be cries for an 8-team playoff. I guarantee it. Because people are going to see, this is what happens when you only have the top 4 teams. You always have that 5th team that's going to be looking out, and that's going to be sitting and looking on the outside looking in which I have to say, look, it happens. The system is never perfect. There's never going to be a perfect system. What happens when you go to 8? People are going to be crying for 16. What happens if you go to 16? People are going to be crying for 32. And in the end, people are going to be wanting March Madness in January. People, I'm going to say this. What happens tomorrow is going to happen. There's going to be no hindsight. To certain teams and certain schools, the decision will be the wrong decision. Deal with it. Okay? You can cry, you can bitch, you can moan, you can do whatever you want about what the committee is going to do. It's not perfect. It never will be perfect. But that's the beauty of college football now, isn't it? You just never know what's going to happen. Me, personally, I enjoyed this season. I loved this season. Why? Because you knew that towards the end of the season, a loss can probably end your season from being in the playoffs. So I am looking forward to 7:30 p.m. tomorrow. I will make sure to be glued to the TV. I will be tweeting like a madman after this decision has been made. And I'm going to then sit back, excuse me, and watch what other people have to say. I'm looking forward to what Ben Albright has to say. I'm looking forward to what Matt Zemek has to say. I'm looking forward to what Matt Miller has to say. I'm looking forward to what my boss, Robin Vandenberg, has to say, because we all know she has a very strong opinion. I'm looking forward to what the average Joe fan has to say. Hell, I'm even going to look forward to what Mel Kiper and Todd McShay have to say. No, I really don't. But it's going to be fun regardless. I'm certainly not going to be looking forward to what Skip Bayless has to say, because whatever he says is going to be garbage anyway, but that's just me. So with that being said, I got about 5 minutes to go. I have to say I had an amazing show tonight. I could not have been happier to have Howard Shatsky, Leigh Steinberg, and Allie Fontana join me once again. Howard was an awesome interview. Leigh was an awesome interview. Allie, as always, doing her thing for fantasy football. Unfortunately, I did not get the chance to interview Peter Flournoy tonight. Hopefully, I can get him on, and another, maybe next week to talk about this, and maybe a quick preview of all the bowl games that are going to be set up. But I got to say, great show, great night. I am very thankful for them to join me, and well, it's about that time, people. My name is Nick Ficarelli. I am the mad scientist of sports. You have entered my lab, and I hope you enjoyed what you had to see. I am going to be shutting down the beacons. I'm going to be erasing the board to get ready for next week's experiments. And who knows what test subjects are going to be coming in here, but I can guarantee you this. It's going to be a very good guest list once again. So I will talk to you next week, same time, 10 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. Pacific, in which the lab will be open once again. But until then, it's time to shut everything down. And time to get ready for tomorrow, because we all know what tomorrow is, people. Football, more football. Sprinkling of pro basketball, sprinkling of college basketball, and of course, college football playoff decisions have to be made. See you guys next week. Going to run one more commercial, and then going to shut it down. Have a good night, ladies and gentlemen.
You live it, breathe it, dream about it. You poured your blood, sweat, and tears into it, and this year, victory is yours. Because you've got FantasySportsWarehouse.com is your secret weapon. Fantasy Sports Warehouse is your one-stop shop for fantasy sports products, blogs, and the latest info. Go to FantasySportsWarehouse.com to get info to help you dominate the fantasy sports season wherever you go.